Hello, and welcome to Confessions of a Successful Leader, hosted by me, Andrew Tallents, the self-coaching expert. In each episode of the show, we hear the insightful confessions of a successful leader who wants to inspire others to live their professional and personal dreams. I am always keen to hear your feedback, particularly in relation to the kinds of leaders you would like me to invite onto the show in future. But for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the rich insights from our special guest. Hello and welcome to another episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader, hosted by me, Andrew Tallents, the self-coaching expert. I'm delighted that Craig Brown has joined me in the studio today. Welcome, Craig.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for having me on.
Good to see you. Looking forward to hearing your story today. The audience always likes to know who they're listening to. So in your own words, just tell us a little bit about yourself and where your current focus is.
So my name is Craig Brown, and my focus is ultimately improving the human's physical, mental, and emotional health in all ages. I'm very passionate about that. We have multiple services in how we support families ultimately improve physically and mentally. And I take great pride in supporting people across the UK and beyond, really, in improving physically and mentally.
Super. We'll hear more about that later on in terms of what you're actually doing right now in terms of the business side of it. But let's actually understand a bit more about you when you're not working. Now, this is always the case when we speak to founders and entrepreneurs, and because you're so passionate about what you do, obviously sometimes it's difficult to switch off, but because you're practicing and preaching around mental and physical health, what is it you do to actually make sure you're there to serve others? How do you replenish the energy?
I think how I replenish my energy is also draining the tank of my energy at the same time. I've come across many leaders or people similar to myself that use physical activity as an enabler to be better and to remove negative energy. I've also got ADHD as well, so if I don't burn off that energy, and it doesn't help, so to improve one's well-being and be present for my son and my family, I've got to get up early. I've got to train and drain that tank in the morning, ultimately.
Good. And in terms of if you were to think now, what's the thing that energizes you the most in terms of the physical activity? What is it?
It's a tricky question, isn't it? I would like to say mixed martial arts. So boxing, kickboxing, anything that's like really physical. I leave feeling on cloud now. You might be able to tell you I've got a little, nearly got my cheek cracked the other day. It's like I've got a podcast on Friday, I need to rub it off. But I love anything around mixed martial arts, kickboxing and boxing. I've coaches for different practices. I see them at least once a week, each week. So there's like 3 different things that I do. Sparring, I love having a good scrap in the morning at 5 a.m. And again, that really helps me focus and be there for other people that need our support ultimately.
Thank you. So let's take you back. This is all about how our childhood and early life experiences inform our leadership and the pros and cons with that and how we learn about it on the journey. So just paint a picture for us, Craig, in terms of those early years for you, and what was that childhood like for you?
I guess the early years for me is that I come from Liverpool in Anfield. It's a very challenging place to be brought up, I guess. Like every Scouser and most families, we all come from a very low economic background. Everyone's fighting for the penny. Everyone's trying to build the pound. I remember an early year memory, I guess, is that we were always scrounging for money to put £5 in the electric meter. Every time we put £5 in, the emergency used to go straight away. So we never really had any lecky or any really hot water. We didn't have central heating. So I remember the early days of my mum and dad doing everything they could to survive and thrive in a space that was very challenging. I remember my mum and dad I think they had like 7 or 8 jobs between them. So as you can imagine, they're out the house a lot. My sister massively helped us. Well, she brought us up really. I just remember every day kind of being a bit of a fight to survive ultimately. And that's not an anomaly story for me. That's a very similar story for a lot of my friendship groups and a lot of people still in Liverpool today. Like it's a very harsh place to live. But like my early years it was about survival ultimately.
And what do you remember back then about what that meant for you in terms of how you learned to survive in that family system back then?
Doing what I could to lessen the burden. I say that now as a wise 35-year-old. But back then, I was still probably a little shit. Tried to do as what I could when I could to help. Uh, that be I still do it now in this house. Turn off the lights as much as I can. Turn off the telly as much as I can. Used to have this little tiny portable heater that blew hot air out, which didn't have central heating. So I used to remember always unplugging it and turning it off. So we would save, I don't even know what the kilowatt was of it, but we might save a penny, which meant a great deal back in the day for us. One thing I did do, which probably didn't help, is that once we got food in the house, I used to just eat as much as I could because we got food on a specific day of the month, and then normally it lasted probably a day, and there was not food for the rest of the few days after. So where I might have saved £1 on the electric heater, we ate all the crisps in the cupboard quite quickly. That was kind of our survival mechanism, just trying to do what we can where we can from a cost-saving point of view.
And it's different for everybody, but in that kind of environment, particularly when your mum and dad are out as well on the 7 or 8 jobs, who can you remember were your role models back then as you were growing up?
This might sound harsh, but no one really. I think now we are very much connected, but back then I felt like we was all in a bit of a silo. We was all on our own, doing our own thing. I'm the middle child, so I might have middle child syndrome as well. But I didn't feel like there was anyone we could really connect to from a role model point of view, which I know what a role model is now to me. My sister was always there to support us in any format, and I was probably the same for my brother. But from a role model point of view, I don't think there's anyone really there. As I've got older, I've come to realise how hard my mum and dad worked to put on the table what they could. Back then, you felt really hard done by, and we haven't got this, and we haven't got the new trainees, we haven't got the football boots, and all those materialistic things that you are when you're younger. But when I was younger, probably no one was just trying to get by and try and hide the poverty from other young people because you don't want to be the odd one out or the rest of it. But from a role model, if I put it down to it, I'd probably say my sister, because she's still there now, waggling the finger every now and again when she wants to.
Excellent. And you mentioned right at the start of the podcast about ADHD. So was that something you were aware of back then, or can you look back at it now and see how that was around you at that time in terms of your life?
I think I've only come to realise it when my son was born, and he's 4 now, which is not that long ago. Don't get me wrong, people would always crack jokes and say never sit still and all the rest of it. But then in reflection, only in the last 4 years, I've seen how that's I would use the word hinder from an education point of view, because I really, really, really struggled in school. I didn't really come away with any specific qualifications. I was always a naughty lad outside the classroom, doing things that you shouldn't do because you just couldn't concentrate, which again, at that time, I didn't know what ADHD was. I didn't understand neurodiversity. I didn't understand how this was technically hindering my education. It's only been in this space for so long I understand what ADHD is. In reflection, I think it's a superpower, but it's also, in some aspects, depends how you look at it, a real challenge to overcome as well.
I think you're right, and superpower is the right word if the environment of which you're operating in encourages that, celebrates it, rewards it. And obviously we know schools generally, never did that and still find it tough to do that now just because of the resources that they have available to them. So that's really interesting, Craig. Thank you for that. And I guess one other, and I don't know the answers because obviously we've not spoken about what we're going to speak about today, but what about, can you remember the earliest time that you actually had a dream as a kid, bearing in mind it was survival, week to week and struggling at school to fit in that sense? Can you remember that earliest dream?
I think the earliest dream is that I spoke to Charlotte, my better half, the other day. We used to get scrapbooks in school, really thin books. I used to draw houses all the time. And I mean all the time, like every page it was a house. And I think in reflection, what I was drawing was not that anything negative happened in my house, but it felt like I was drawing a safe house, a posh house, an environment that wasn't my house. Again, in reflection, these are all very different things, but I think a dream of mine was to have a family home, if that makes sense. And it's only been again, since Billy was born, I really understand what a family home is. And now we've got this family home, and it's a lovely home that I'm in. Uh, Still kind of like, as cliche as it sounds, kind of pinch me moments that we actually live in this house. So I think a dream was to have a nice family home. And I honestly was about 5 or 6, right, drawing these pictures, I think.
And what I love about what you said there, and I'm sure that will resonate with the audience, is there are some people who aspire to have a big house, but you've used the term family home, which really tells us a lot, about what was important to you back then. So thank you for that. Let's move on then. So obviously you've already told us that you were, I can relate to this a little bit because I was naughty-ish at school, but when you were doing all that and you weren't getting the education that you really needed and deserved, at that age, what was then happening as you started to become a man in that sense and being perceived as an adult? Let's talk about that transition.
How long have we got?
Long enough.
I think like a lot of young men with no real direction and technically no real possibilities, either that be with education, going to college or whatever, needing a couple of quid, you get involved with people that you shouldn't really be involved in. Either that be drugs, either that be specific people that you shouldn't be hanging around with, doing things that you shouldn't be doing. These are ages from probably 11, 12, 13, 14. So my stepdaughter now, she's 16 and she's good as gold. When I was 10 and 11, when you're still technically a child and a baby, I was doing things just to pay for a pair of trainees or me footy boots or shinnies or me football subs, just things that you needed to do to get by. So as I went into adulthood, which is our classes 11 or 12, I was involved with people that were selling drugs, and I was selling drugs and I was involved in that culture. And that went on for a long time. So probably from like 10, 11 up to like 7 or 18, roughly. I was not a kingpin. I was not a infamous drug dealer. I was probably influenced and used for the greater good for the other people that were making these money. And I learned a lot in those years about hustle. You learned a lot about sales. I learned a lot about survival again, ultimately. But even as I see a child now, 10, 11 years, who's actually a child where I was not a child back then, I was living as a man, ultimately, and trying to survive and money for food and everything else.
So as we listen to that and try and imagine what your life was like then, and for you, it was a normal way of being, wasn't it? It was just like that every single day, and people are lucky and get out. What about you? What was it that changed for you to change that point of being able to get out of that kind of environment?
I think it was a long time. I think that happened, I was in that space, technically, for over a decade, really. And the only reason I changed is because many things happened in the process of that. I was violently attacked over a small amount of drugs, like violently attacked. I was in different houses all the time. I got arrested multiple times for lots of serious crimes that, again, it's the old cliche saying, I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. But I was involved in these people. And I was in cells for really crazy crimes that I would never do. But I got caught up in all this culture, as people call it. And then I realised eventually I'm either going to die or go to prison. And one of the days I went to prison and seen someone who I knew who was in jail. And that was a real tipping point, is like the whole feeling of going into a prison, how people were inside the prison. I just didn't like that. So I moved away from it and started working in sales, ultimately.
So about 10 years and lots of things to make you think about the life that you were living. So after those 10 years, just explain a little bit now about what happened at that point.
So during the phase of those 10 years, lots of negative, I guess, things happened, which I thought was negative, but sometimes you need to be kicked up the arse and realigned a little bit to really see where your potential is and where you need to go in life. So a few of the things that were tipping points was I developed a real strong addiction to cocaine. Like, I was on it every day, and I wasn't earning a lot of money. So then you owed people money, and you were involved in certain things to pay off debt and all the rest of it. As you can imagine, there's loads of things that could potentially happen in a space of 10 years. But I was severely addicted to cocaine, which doesn't come on its own. You drink and you smoke. I remember I worked as a window cleaner, and 7 a.m. in the morning, I was drinking a can of Carling in my pocket. I had my squeegee and my mop this side, the other can of Carling in my pocket this side. By 7:15, I was taking loads of cocaine while I was doing windows. I've got psoriasis on my hands. I'm not sure if you can see it, but I've got psoriasis on my hands. And I remember this one day. It's December time. Put your hands in the water. You're squeegeeing. You're drinking a can of Carling. You're up the ladder squeegeeing. And by the time I got to the top of the ladder, my whole hand was freezing, and all my skin was cracking. So it was all bleeding in the water. And it was horrendous 12 months of being a window cleaner ultimately. And I was earning £25 a week, and we would walk for ages doing these rounds, and it was a very physical job. I went really, really thin, like really thin. As you can imagine, your physical and mental health isn't tip top in those situations. And then you're on the hamster wheel the next day and the next day and the next day. And I worked as a window cleaner, I think, for best part of 18 months, living that same cycle of addiction, cocaine, alcohol, smoking, and my health deteriorated significantly over that time period.
What happened next?
I ultimately became homeless. So again, you flee the nest. I'm a man, can do this on my own. At this age, I was 21? I think it was 20, 21. Thinking you know it all. I don't need anyone. It's their fault I'm in this position in the first place. All that victim mentality that you go through at that early age of life. And I didn't have a residency to stay. I could have went back to my dad's, but we fell out for one reason or another. Didn't have always the best relationship with my mum when I was younger, so didn't go there. Wasn't close enough to any of the relatives, and no one else really knew the depths that I was in. And I don't think I knew then. You just don't, you're just living. So then I was homeless for probably the best part of 20 odd months. I was either sofa hopping, trying to stay in other people's spaces, and eventually people were like, you can't stay here, because I was just becoming a bit of a leech, ultimately. So then I was rough sleeping for a time period. So then when you're rough sleeping, you've got an addiction, and then you've got a hygiene issue, and then you've got a mental health issue, and an emotional health issue. You can quickly decline, even if you was in that space for a day or two. Never mind the compounding effects of all of that happens every day. You become reliant on the drink. I was already reliant on the drug from a dopamine perspective, I would imagine. Then I lost my job as a window cleaner. Believe it or not, you can lose your job as a window cleaner. That's the level I was at. Because I had no source of income, really. And if you can imagine, or the listeners can imagine, a typical homeless person who is on drugs and alcohol, that's what I probably looked like and was acting like for a long period of time. And I was completely shocked physically and mentally.
So obviously we know what you do today. So I'm really interested to know what the turning point was for you from that depth, that low, which you've described, and how that started to move for you, and how much was that about you, and how much was it about somebody that helped you and supported you to do that?
I think people who may know, may not know, this is my belief system, is that it's not a quick fix. It doesn't happen overnight. I think my recovery, and I still believe I'm in recovery, because I think I can switch it back quite easily. Over the space of, I'd say, a decade, it's took me to become drug-free. I'm not alcohol-free, because I still drink when I go on holiday, have a shandy, and that's all I enjoy. Again, a few occasions was probably an instigator of change. So one was the violent crime towards me, or violent attack, which was more than one occasion, but there's one significant one. I think 5 occasions happened in 1 year for various issues. Secondly, I went to Gambia on a volunteer basis, and I put my flights on a Capital One credit card. Took ages to pay that off. And I went there, didn't even know there was even a place called the Gambia. And I went to volunteer to help, whatever that meant at the time. I went and I seen how other people were living in much worse circumstances than myself. And it kind of made me really appreciate life and be grateful for life. And that was the first instigator of more than just being. It was being more present in the world. It was being more mindful about myself. And when I went to the Gambia, I didn't think any of this was even happening at the time. But in reflection, you can tell. And then the third anomaly, I always believe, was Charlotte, my other half. She came into my life when I was working in Tesco as a shelf stacker. And I got moved to the Heswall store as a placement phone shop manager because I worked my way up through sales within Tesco. And she bounced into my phone shop. There's just a small space in the Tesco store, and she was in charge of the store. And Tesco PLC is different to Tesco Mobile, so they're not actually in charge of each other, even though Charlotte thought she was in charge of me, which was fun. So she came in bouncing in, and I got on with her straight away, but I was in a relationship. And then as time goes on, we connected later down the line when I became single, and I haven't looked back since, really.
A lovely story, and we'll come back to that in a moment. But I'm fascinated, I'm sure everyone listening to this will be, even though Gambia, and you didn't notice at the time, was one of the key factors of changing your life, even the way you perceive that and what you could do about it. How did you come across volunteering in the Gambia?
So before me and Charlotte were an item, we were speaking, and last minute somebody dropped out who she was going with, so she was going anyway. And she said to me after 6 months of course, and do you want to come with me? I was like, is that even a place? And she was like, yeah. So I didn't want to lose face. I'd be like, oh, I can't afford it. I haven't got a pot to piss in. I can just about barely buy food. I was like, yeah, I'll come. And I remember going on what was it called? You know, like those day loans or something like that. Trying to get enough money to buy the flight to go over there. Because I just wanted to spend time with Charlotte and just see what it was about and all the rest of it. So that was the reason why we went. But Charlotte is family and connections. I've always been going to the Gambia to volunteer for like 2-3 years. So she was passionate about it, but it was the first time she was going. And then subsequently, which I guess we can talk about later on, we've built things in the Gambia. We've been back every year for the past 4 years, sorry. Because it holds quite a special space, but that's the reason why we went there, because Charlotte asked me to come last minute, and I was like, yeah, I can afford that, and actually couldn't, but I ended up going.
So what I'm loving here, and I'm going to put these words into your mouth, but it's, well, as I'm hearing this story, there were factors, there was something that, really difficult and bad that happened to you, which obviously would have made you really think about, how can I change my life? Secondly, then you've got an opportunity to go and see somebody else's life and experience that in terms of as a human being and recognizing it's all relative. And then the third thing, the love of a woman, the love of a partner who can see the opportunity that you have in your life and creates that chance with her to go and then maybe be a catalyst for that. So I love the way you described that, but you still have to do something with all of those things. So just talk to us about how that then started to develop. How did those events then start to shape your thinking about what you're going to do with your life?
So when I met Charlotte, she said to me straight away, there's something about you. I thought this was a pickup line, but it wasn't. But she said that because she was part of this leadership team in Tesco. And she said, there's something about you that I've never come across before. And I don't know if it's a superpower or you're crazy. There's something special about you. So I thought, okay, cool. Didn't know really what it meant. But she's always been a supporter of my speciality, whatever that is. And she was always celebrating that with senior team in Tesco, and big MDs come down. It's like, wanting you to meet Craig. He's really special. He's took this store from X amount of revenue to X amount of revenue, like just through sheer passion and determination and motivation. So I left Tesco, and this is me and Charlotte being together for a year or two now, maybe a bit longer. And you leave a space to get a higher pay grade normally, or no job satisfaction, or you're not being seen as worthy of the space or whatever. So I left 2 jobs and ended up at this highly paid, well, I thought this was really highly paid from where I've come from, basically as a sales manager for a large office space company. But when you've got extra disposable income, what do you spend it on? So I ended up going back into my negative loop, and I hid it from Charlotte for a long time. Well, I hid the whole thing from Charlotte, to be honest. She didn't know about any of my addictions. And then it got to a point where I was uncontrollable, really. And Charlotte got a whiff of it. And she gave me the ultimatum of either leave me or stop. They're the 2 options. And again, the love of a woman or connection with a woman, or they always say behind every great man is a better woman. I'm a firm believer of that. Charlotte's my savior ultimately. So I decided to, well, she decided to quit the job, leave the job, and go back into something I was passionate about, which was fitness, well-being, mental health. So I think I left the job with commission around 85k a year, roughly, to earning absolutely nothing a year. And the only reason I could do that is because Charlotte said, I'll pay for your phone bill. You can stay at my house and I'll feed you, because she believed in me that I could build a business or businesses that will help me, but also help millions of people, ultimately. So I'll always be in her debt. And it's a funny story that I say. Is that the only reason I got with Charlotte is because I needed a place to sleep, because I have to go. She tells people that story, but it's more than that. She kind of put a bit of a fire in me to like give back to her, because she did so much for me. So I left the job, set up a company to deliver fitness classes, mental health support, lived experience, and also addiction and homelessness. And that was the start of Rage Fitness Wellbeing Group.
And when was that, Craig?
2018/2019.
So we'll come to COVID in a minute, but interesting time to set up a business in that sense. I know.
It was a nightmare.
But before we get to that, I'm really interested, and I'm sure the audience will be interested in this. Bear in mind, I get the fact that she had confidence in you, because obviously everything you'd experienced in your life around survival and this ability to really move with everything that's going around you lends itself well to sales, so you can convince anybody to invest in you in that sense. I get that skill, but where had it come from around this sort of fitness, well-being? And bear in mind, you neglected yourself so much as an individual. Where did that come from in terms of that as what you're going to do and give back?
So when I was working in Tesco as a shelf stacker, I was already a level 3 personal trainer, and I was when we would sit down either with lunch with Charlotte, she'd be passing by, or whoever, I was always trying to support people with physical exercise, nutritional advice, X, Y, and Z. And I didn't really do much with that qualification. I dabbled in gyms and stuff like that, but again, addiction takes hold of me, and you lose your way, I guess, and you have to have a certain standard when you're in those professional environments. So I was always passionate about helping people, but I didn't really realize it until we set up the organization to do so. So Charlotte remembered me giving advice on lunch breaks and speaking to people from the checkouts to senior team people. If they wanted to hear the advice or not, I was giving it regardless, which is funny because I was giving advice out about health and I was not at peak performance myself, ultimately. That kind of shows, I guess, the caring aspects or the give I'm trying to do for people, even when I was really poorly physically and mentally myself.
Thank you for that. So talk to us then about the early years in terms of the business, because you've not run a business before.
No, never run a business.
Exactly. But it is really interesting, Ferry. There's going to be lots of people out there that will have a version of this story for themselves, whatever that is, from hardship in terms of having something they want to follow with the support of someone who's going to help them, and then that environment to drive it. But it's not easy. So just talk to us a little bit about the learning, and particularly here from a leadership perspective of self, and then as you actually start to build the business.
So I give you a very small, quick, brief history lesson. Is that we rented a building for, I think, £7 an hour. Think of a big warehouse. It was really, 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 really run down. We hired the whole building for £7 an hour. And I would sit on this table that had paint all over it, and it was bright red. And I would sit on that chair, old-fashioned chair with broken foam patterns on it, with me little tin, with me couple of change pound coins in there, and I would charge people £3 to come and do a fitness class. And for the first 3 to 4 months, so first quarter, we may have topped off at 4 people coming to a class. So after profit and loss perspective, we may have been up a couple of quid, but most of the time, 2 people came, so we was down a quid. That was the first 3 to 4 months of the business from a sales point of view. I've never in my life done any marketing, ever. So then I was trying to market and showcase how good we are, and why would you come to us rather than David Lloyd of all places, and why would you come to us rather than Total Fitness, and why would you come to us instead of Pure Gym? And with all this, we didn't have any equipment. So I was trying to sell a space that was really run down. Me with a little change tin that I got from Home and Bargain, and a float that I got out of Charlotte's piggy bank, and tried to convince people to come and do fitness classes with us. And after 3 or 4 month mark, I was like, Charlotte, you're paying me phone bill. You're giving me food. Like, I've got to contribute somewhere. I can go and get a job tomorrow. Just like, just see how, just push a little bit more, see what you can do. So then, again, everything I've learned up until this point, I believe is kind of self-taught. Either that be failing with the social media post, or how I engage with the client to keep their attention and all the rest of it. I believe it's been quite a own self-development. But then I changed tact slightly. So what I did is that I would do a fitness class, because everyone does fitness classes. There's no USP in that. And I would say at the end, I would speak about mental well-being. I would speak about emotional health. I would speak about why are you coming here rather than Pure Gym? Why are you coming here rather than Total Fitness? And I was building relationships up very, very fast, because what I realized is that when I got into the nitty and gritty of supporting people's mental well-being, I was quite good at it. And I don't really give me much myself self-praise that much, but I was really good at it because I cared, ultimately. And in the early years, I was given advice and nutritional support and help with family health and well-being. And over the years, I've built an education that I can speak on most topics, I would imagine. But back then, I was out of my depth, I believe, a little bit. But from a P&L point of view, we didn't really earn any money for 4 months. Probably lost money. And then one day, I decided to borrow some equipment from Total Fitness, because I thought I haven't got any money to buy any equipment, so I borrowed some. If anyone's watching from Total Fitness, I apologize. And then the day I borrowed some, I took some photos in this warehouse that was run down on the table with white paint and bright red paint. I said, got new equipment. Can't wait for the classes tonight. And 6 people came that night. So 6 times 3, I felt like a millionaire. And then I guess through passion, we just built it from that point onwards. But the early years, it wasn't that successful.
Absolutely. So let's just fast forward to now, and then we'll talk about a couple of things. But just describe, what the business looks like today in totality, just so the listeners and audience get a sense of that, where it is today.
So we've got a 30,000 square foot, 30,000 or 30,000 square foot building that is got the highest level of equipment in. So we've got probably about £250,000 equipment in the building. We had on average 26,000 attendees into the building. That comes from various sources, different referral pathways of all different magnitude. We're probably one of the only privately owned independent gyms that work in collaboration with the NHS, Public Health England, different local authorities all across the Northwest. I would imagine we're the only wellbeing service or independent gym that is collaborating with multiple universities to showcase our impact through academia research, to showcase how good we are at what we do. We work in collaboration with lots of different brands and lots of different organisations around the workforce health and wellbeing, because we believe a healthy workforce is a strong workforce, which is good profit. The Wellbeing Centre is such a positive space to be in every aspect. And then that is, I guess, one building that we operate. Then we've got our own health and wellbeing app that people can access to get support for the physical and mental health. So everything we do delivered it physically, we've kind of put it into digital formats with a whole analytic system behind it, AI system behind it, that improves physical, mental, emotional health. And then we work in collaboration with Youth Justice Service. So we support young people where I once was, navigating life. We have various programs through education, private schools, public schools to support, again, physical and mental health. And then we've obviously got the Wellbeing Centre, which is in the Gambia, that we built in 2024. And again, loads of services, loads of projects go on in there. And that is equally as a passion of mine, because we save lives daily in that space, from type 1 diabetes to hypertension and lots of other things that happen within that space. And then it's got a sister brand called Calm Coffee, which is a chain of mental health coffee shops.
Wow. All in the space of really 3-4 years, isn't it, really? Because COVID was, incredible.
So just on that, we opened the gym that you kind of see now with less equipment, but we opened up the gym in November 2019, and then we were shut down in March, I think it was, 2020. So we were building up our memberships, and then we just paused for 2 years, really, from a growth perspective. So we've done a lot in the years we could actually operate in.
So a couple more questions we've got time for, and the time's flown today. The first is, and it might be a reflection question, I don't know, but particularly since you started the business, and particularly in the last 3 or 4 years as it's really started to accelerate, what are the couple of things that have been critical in terms of that success from your perspective, from, again, a self-leadership and leadership perspective in the space?
I'm smiling because if Charlotte watches this, she's going to fall off a chair. Not always being right, and also empowering your team to take leadership. I'm a control freak, and I also passionate about what we do. So back in the day, I used to think I'm the only one who's good enough to do it. But since I've give away control and allowed people to blossom, we've grown exponentially in more ways that I believe we could. We're taking a step back and letting your team do what they can do, rather than tell them what they think they should do. And yeah, I'm not always right.
Excellent. Okay, so this is the time. If anyone out there wants to get in contact with you and support what it is that you're doing, what's the best way for them to do that, Craig?
So a couple of ways. You can either email me at craig@ragefitnesscompany.com. There's a website, ragefitnesscompany.com. My social media is Craig_Brown_wellbeing on Instagram. I say Instagram because most of my traffic goes through there. So you can contact me on that, and also LinkedIn, Craig Brown.
Well, Craig, it's been fascinating hearing your stories today. Thanks for spending the time. And it's just been wonderful to get to know you better as well. So thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for inviting me on. I loved it.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader. You can access all previous episodes of the show at confessionsofaSuccessfulLeader.com. If you are interested in finding out more about conscious leadership and self-coaching, just type in Andrew Tallents into LinkedIn or your favorite browser, and you'll find my contact details and all the content that you need. Until next time, don't forget to stay present, curious, and above all, conscious.